light breaks the shadow of the weary heart. Truth cuts the dark like a flaming dart. Voices rising strong to lift the call. This is the time we give it all. Lynne Scott Haggerman bringing the fire. Words that ignite hearts burning higher. Faith and power, no chains can bind. Step into the light, leave fear behind.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Lynne Scott Haggerman Podcast, where truth has no filter. Freedom is our mission, and light exposes the darkness. God bless you, each and every one, for being here. I'm your host, Lynne Scott Haggerman. I'm a survivor of child trafficking and medical experimentation underground at a U.S. University Medical Center in conjunction with our government through the MK Ultra mind control program. I am the voice they try to silence. Be sure to visit my websites, QGRIT, the letter Q, which stands for quantum, because God is going after this child trafficking problem in a quantum way. QGRIT.org, where we're helping trafficked children who are rescued and adults with any type of trauma. God named that website after that John Wayne movie, True Grit, where the little girl goes after the bad guys. So here we go. You can also find me at Live Younger with Lynne, LYNNE.com, where I'm an independent distributor of LifeWave, the X39, and Celergize stem cell regeneration, which is the wearable medbed. Now, let's get to the truth. And I am so happy to bring on stage Mr. John Eastman, actually, Dr. John Eastman. Hello, John.
Hi, Lynn. How are you? Thanks for having me on the show.
Well, thanks for being here. I know you're extremely, extremely busy, and it is just my blessing and my honor to have you on today. I prepared a bio, Jim, so I want to, John, I'm sorry. I'm sure everyone knows all about you, but just in case people don't know, I have a bio I want to read before we get into our topics. My guest today is Dr. John Eastman, nationally recognized constitutional law expert, attorney, and a fearless defender of our U.S. Constitution. Praise God. Dr. Eastman served as a law clerk to Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas and has argued multiple cases before the United States Supreme Court. He's a former dean of Chapman University School of Law, the founding director of the Center for Constitutional Jurisprudence, senior fellow at the Claremont Institute, and has published extensively in outlets like the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, National Review, New York Times. A trusted legal voice, Dr. Eastman has appeared on ABC, CBS, NBC, Fox, CNN, BBC, PBS, and now the Lynne Scott Haggerman Podcast. I just had to add that, John. I don't think that's officially.
I'll have to redo my bio to put that up at the top. There we go.
Thank you so much. It's not official, but I just thought, this is my 8th show I'm doing with the Patriots Prayer Network, John. So just little plug there. There we go. You're a constitutional analyst. John is perhaps best known for his unapologetic stance in defending election integrity, which we all followed. I followed extensively. Challenging federal outreach, which unfortunately we have quite a bit of, although that's improving, and upholding the rule of law, even when it's politically inconvenient. He's one of the few legal scholars willing to speak boldly about deep state corruption, constitutional crises, and government lawlessness. Again, it's just such an honor to have you on my show today.
Well, Lynn, thanks for having me on, and I look forward to our conversation. There's a lot going on in the country, and as you know, we were on the precipice of losing everything that our founders bequeathed to us and that they fought so valiantly to establish on this continent. They pledged their lives and their fortunes in a sacred honor, and they meant it. And we were about to lose all that, and it was happening right before our very eyes. I happened to be cast into a role to try and do something about it, and for that, I've been the victim of lawfare. It doesn't rise to the level of what you suffered in your own life, but it is still rather significant and still ongoing in my case. Criminal charges in Georgia and Arizona, bar disciplinary proceedings, probably the longest and most expensive in bar history out in California. I was even an unindicted co-conspirator in Jack Smith's criminal indictment against President Trump in Washington, D.C. because we dared to raise questions about the illegality that occurred in the 2020 election, things that we all saw with our own eyes.
Yes, we did, and which we the people clearly know. Well, not clearly, we're learning more and more all the time, especially after President Trump's recent post on Truth Social. But I didn't ask you about this before the show started, but I would really like to know, you are a warrior for justice, and there's absolutely no doubt to that. Why? What motivates you? What? Because you are taking battering after battering. I mean, you're a true soldier in the fight. Why did you get involved in the first place? What compelled you to do this, and what compels you to keep going?
My whole career has been devoted to the study of the principles of the American founding, a miraculous event in human history. Second, in my view, only to the birth of Christ himself, when God became man. And this was miraculous, an assembly of intellects that the world had never seen, the creation of a government continent, well, ultimately be continent-wide on terms that nobody ever thought possible. And they fought those battles to ensure that a government devoted to protection of the people and to freedom and to prosperity could flourish, and rejected the old notion that some people, as Thomas Jefferson famously said, are born booted and speared to ride the others. And they were successful in that. It was an experiment. Nobody knew whether they could pull it off, but they did. And no, it's one thing to say, it's an experiment, I don't think we want to take that, but we know this experiment succeeded. And to throw it off and to let it be lost would be to our eternal shame. But more than just our own, and carrying on this legacy and the light to the world. Because if we lose freedom here, where else in the world are you going to go to find it?
That's right.
But it's not just that. I've got kids, and now they are having kids, so I've got grandkids.
Oh.
And what we have witnessed over the last decade or more is something I don't want to leave them having to deal with. And I'm in a position to be able to deal with it. My whole career has been aimed toward being able to engage in this fight. And I consider it the greatest honor of my life to be cast into a role to be able to take up that fight. And so that's what we do. It's costly. It's taken its toll. There are roller coaster up and downs. But I can't imagine a place more important for me to be, or work more important for me to be doing. Now, I gave that statement at a speech where my wife was attending with me a while back, and I said, I can't imagine a place I'd rather be. And she said, oh, I can. Paris, Bahamas, all sorts of places. So I always have to make clear to say, I can't imagine a place more important to be, and being on the front lines of this battle to ensure that my kids and grandkids don't have to continue the battle on their own.
Amen. I know a large part of your battle, and you mentioned the legal issues that you're currently involved in, has to do with the 2020 election and your stance on that, and your willingness, praise God, to help. Recently, President Trump posted on Truth Social, this was on July 29, a quote, his face, and he said, "It's time to indict Obama, the traitor, for treason." And I would like you to expand on that and give your opinions and thoughts as much as you would like to share today.
Sure, and I want to be very constitutional here. Tulsi Gabbard, the director of national intelligence, referred Obama and John Brennan and Comey and I forget who else over to the Department of Justice for criminal prosecution for what she called treasonous conspiracy. There are two aspects of that referral. The word conspiracy is a criminal federal statute that they have all, in my view, violated. And I've been saying that for a long time, including a lot of others. It's not just the Russia hoax thing, but it's the ongoing weaponization of our Justice Department, of our criminal prosecutions in state, and of our bar disciplinary proceedings. All of that is part of a single conspiracy. Not everybody was involved in every aspect of it, but they were all involved in a conspiracy to try and deprive the American people of the fundamental right that they have to give their consent to the governed. We do that by free and fair elections. So criminal conspiracy is the legal issue. The word, I think, is political rhetoric. in a way that we all use the word treason for anybody that's trying to undermine our values, our constitutional system, or what have you. But the language in the Constitution is very specific. Treason is the only crime actually set out in the Constitution in Article 2. And it's very specific and very narrow. It means giving aid and comfort to the enemy. And however outrageous the conduct of Obama and the intelligence community they were not giving aid and comfort to an enemy in the way that word is defined in the Constitution. We talk about China being our enemy or Russia being our enemy, but we're not in a war against either of them, and so they don't qualify as enemy in that constitutional sense.
Okay.
So actual treason charges are not within the realm of possibility, but seditious conspiracy, conspiracy to obstruct the government, all of those things are fair game, and they're very serious. They're not charges that include the death penalty like treason does, but they are charges that include 20 years felony sentences and what have you. So I like to separate what the pure technical legal term is versus the political rhetoric, because it was treasonous in the way we use that word in common parlance, even if
Yes.
it doesn't meet the mandate or the very narrow interpretation spelled out in the Constitution.
So what is conspiracy? What is the constitutional and legal definition of conspiracy? And so what is being alleged that Obama, Brennan, Comey et al. Did?
So there are many crimes involved here, and then the conspiracy is the legal definition of conspiracy is a meeting of the minds to engage in some illegal conduct. You don't even actually have to pull off the illegal conduct to be charged with conspiracy. You have to have a meeting of the minds by the players, and you have to have certain overt acts that advance the overall goal of the conspiracy. Now, they actually pulled off the conspiracy. Their criminal acts were to weaponize the intelligence community and the intelligence assessments in order to undermine, first to try and prevent his election, and then undermine the election of the president of the United States. They used these false documents, which, by the way, were funded with millions of dollars from the Hillary Clinton campaign, laundered through her law firm, Perkins Coie, to pay for Fusion GPS to hire a foreign intelligence former officer, spy, who had a Russian asset. So they were using a Russian asset to create this false narrative. They were the ones that were colluding with the Russian asset.
Yes.
To create this false narrative that it was President Trump that was colluding with the Russians in order to win the 2016 election. So let's just leave it at that for a moment and talk about the illegality that occurred there. First of all, Hillary Clinton gave that money to her campaign law firm. They falsely reported that money as campaign finance compliance. It was not. It was a hiring of opposition research, a hiring of foreign assets, hiring of a Russian asset to create a false narrative. So the documents that they filed with the Federal Election Commission were fraudulent. And that's already been held to be true. Hillary Clinton's campaign was fined a very large amount, but not any criminal charges ever brought for this false reporting. Then it gets even worse. And then they use that false dossier created by Christopher Steele, this former British spy, relying on this false stories from this Russian asset. And they coordinated with other intelligence agencies from our fellow countries, or fellow friendly countries like Great Britain or New Zealand, to plant stories that when they say, well, I spoke with so-and-so, Carter Page, about X. Well, he spoke with Carter Page by telling Carter Page something. Carter Page didn't have anything to do with it. They then use that to get a FISA warrant, a Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act warrant, to spy on Carter Page, who was an advisor, a foreign policy advisor to the Trump campaign. There were 4 of them. Those FISA warrants were false. They knew them to be false. In fact, one of the documents involved whether Carter Page was himself providing information to the CIA, because if he was a CIA asset, he's obviously helping, not hurting, our national security.
Right.
And there was an email that said he's not that he is an asset. And a guy named Kevin Kleinsmith doctored that email to say he's not an asset, to have it say exactly the opposite. And then that information was put into the FISA warrant by people who knew it was false. So there's perjury on the court to further this conspiracy scheme. There's a doctoring of evidence. One of the charges against many of the J6 defendants was what I describe as the old mob witness intimidation statute. If you were turning state's evidence against the mob, that was a pretty dangerous thing to do. The mob would then threaten you and your family with all sorts of things, including murder. And if the mob target of those investigations was caught doing that as well, there was this mob witness intimidation statute that added another 20-year felony to whatever crimes they were already doing. That was amended after the Enron scandal to say, and if you destroy documents or alter documents in order to avoid prosecution or otherwise seek to obstruct us in our going after you on justice grounds, then you can be held liable with that 20-year felony. They use that against the J6ers to say, well, you were trying to obstruct Congress, and therefore otherwise obstruct is enough to cover you. Supreme Court threw that out for the J6ers, saying it has nothing to do with documents. But what these guys did was altering documents or hiding documents in order to avoid criminal prosecution for their criminal conduct. So I think 1512, that section of the U.S. Code, is back on the table as part. The conspiracy is to violate other laws, and that's one of the many other laws that they did. They also, as we learned just in the last couple of weeks from Tulsi Gabbard, and thank God she was made. By the way, they picked on the wrong person to put on the do not fly list because she knows where bodies are buried, and President Trump knows that she knows where the bodies are buried and puts her in as director of national intelligence to start uncovering those bodies, and she's doing it.
Yes,
and what we learned in her expose a couple of weeks ago, that the National Intelligence Presidential Daily Briefing, the PDP, had repeatedly said there's evidence that the Russians are trying to buy some ads on Facebook and Twitter, to disrupt things and create, hostility and animosity among the sides of our country. Everybody does that. I mean, it was a couple $100,000. It's a drop in the bucket. They said there's no evidence that they had any ability or actually did do anything substantial enough to have had an effect on the election. Those were the intelligence. And it's not just one intelligence agency acting as a rogue. All of them signed off on that. President Obama apparently didn't like it. He hauled them in, and they said, we're going to change that to say exactly the opposite of what you've already concluded. And then they had that meeting in the Oval Office to make that the directive. The intelligence guys went back and started doctoring and altering the documents, which is a crime. And then they leaked that classified information to friendly media outlets. That's also a very serious crime, all as part of this effort to create this false narrative that after Trump elected, to try and kneecap his ability to govern in the way that the American people had chosen him to do. So I mean, I've already rattled off nearly a dozen different crimes that they violated in the furtherance of this conspiracy. Now, there's one other issue that's extremely important here, by calling it a conspiracy, because all of those crimes are subject to a 5 or at most 7-year statute of limitations. And this stuff happened nearly 10 years ago. So they're outside the statute of limitations and therefore can't be prosecuted for those particular crimes. But by calling it a conspiracy and providing the evidence to show that, in fact, it was a conspiracy, you all of a sudden bring in all of the ongoing continuation of that conspiracy. The efforts to raid Mar-a-Lago to recover the documents that in fact exposed some of this stuff. That happened within the last 5 years. And to cover their tracks on what they did 10 years ago with a new crime within the last 5 years means that the conspiracy can be prosecuted. The other thing that's extremely important about all that is it's a nationwide conspiracy, which means it doesn't have to be brought in the hyper-partisan, overtly anti-Trump District of Columbia.
Praise God.
with the District of Columbia judges and the District of Columbia jury pool. It can be bought in the Southern District of Florida, where Mar-a-Lago is. It can be brought in Mesa County, Colorado, in the District of Colorado, where Tina Peters is prosecuted for exposing some of this illegality in the election. It can be brought anywhere some of these overt acts as part of the conspiracy occurred. And that means we're much more likely to get a fair and even jury pool and set of judges than you would ever get in the Washington, D.C. at the moment.
Yes. I'm astounded. Do you think you'll be helping at all in this? Have they approached you? Do you think, because you've helped so much in the past, I know it's gotten you in deep water in several areas, but what do you think?
Well, I have a lot of friends in the administration and the higher ups of the Department of Justice and the FBI and a number of other places. And I won't go into any detail about what kind of advice I give, if I give anything. But I will say a couple of things have become public now. All my work on the president's birthright citizenship effort, my scholarship has become front and center of that. So one might surmise that maybe I had a hand in that. Certainly my scholarship did. Elon Musk's spending cuts and Doge. The other major focus of my scholarship over the last 20 years has been on the Constitution's spending power. And people think, like Nancy Pelosi's, that we can spend on whatever we vote for. That's just not true. The spending clause has two very distinct limits. It has to be for the common defense or the general welfare, not local welfare. They're part of the inaptly named Inflation Reduction Act under the Biden administration includes a massive grant program, and it specifically requires that the grants be for only local projects. That's the opposite of what the Constitution permits. And so we've got a brief pending in the First Circuit Court of Appeals up in Boston, trying to get the courts to start enforcing the limits on the spending power as well. So I have been involved publicly in some of those things, and beyond that, I'll leave it for anybody that I've been in discussions with to decide whether and if to disclose, if there's anything there to disclose.
Well, thank you for that. So I have a couple questions about the situation we've been talking about. This morning, I was reading in the socials, and they commented that George Soros was the money funding the Hillary Clinton, that he preceded Hillary doing what she did. So have you heard about Soros's involvement?
Well, Soros has got his hands in a lot of different pots, and we've seen that extensively. I strongly suspect that he's involved in funding all of these groups that are running around trying to get Trump's lawyers disbarred everywhere. The 65 Project, States United Democracy Center, Just Security, Fair Elections, all these misnamed things. But Soros is also very, very clever. He puts in some seed money, and then they get federal tax dollar money through USAID and all these other scams that Elon Musk was exposing. Then he gets to take his money back and apply it to someplace else. So I think one of the reasons why the left is going so bonkers at Elon Musk's Doge efforts is because he's shining a light under the rock, and the vermin are just scurrying, and they've been raiding our taxpayer funds, our treasury, for decades, and it's finally exposed. And their standard line anytime you want to try and cut this stuff in a budget is you're going to hurt poor people and kids and single moms and all that stuff. Right. When we see in fact what they actually are funding, it's their narrative is just not working anymore. And hats off to Elon Musk for exposing that, and to President Trump for giving him the elbow room to do it. I'm sorry they've kind of had a bit of a falling out, but I think that'll get reconciled when they realize again that the stakes are much higher and they're better as a team.
I do too. Where do you think Doge is going next, since you bring up that topic? I had read recently how they're going to start using AI and cutting federal regulations by about 50% through AI alone. What do you think about where Doge is heading?
I think I don't know much about the AI stuff, but I will say just bringing basic accounting principles to the operation of government, which DOGE is trying to do agency by. I mean, look, it's gotten so bloated, nobody can even tell you actually how many agencies and bureaus we have. I mean, they've just lost track, and they don't code where the money goes. They just, money goes out, and there's no reconciliation of, did it go out consistent with an act of Congress. And this is extremely important with a judicial decision that just came down last week or 2 weeks ago after the president signed the big, beautiful bill.
Yeah.
And that excluded Planned Parenthood from being funded with Medicare and Medicaid. And a judge ordered that they keep getting money. I mean, one of the most basic principles of our constitutional system is that Congress has the power of the purse,
Right.
and no monies can be sent out from the Treasury but by operation of law. And that
Right.
law didn't include monies going to Planned Parenthood. End of story. The notion that a judge could order monies to still be going to Planned Parenthood, even though they're not in the budget, that means they're going to be drawing money from the Treasury without law, in violation of Article 1 of the Constitution. It really is saying. So I think what DOGE was doing is putting into place systems that every business in the country, certainly every big business in the country, has to comply. You've got to audit the money. You've got to know where the money's going. You've got to know what the authority for spending that money is. You just ask anybody that has a corporate credit card what they have to do at the end of the month and turning in their receipts in order to verify that the money was spent for the legitimate reasons of the business rather than personal expenditures. Well, the government agencies weren't doing that. They were just sending money out left and right without knowing where it was going, knowing what the authority was. And what DOGE has put into place and said, you've got to cite a statute that authorizes that, or you can't spend that money. It's pretty simple. And the people that have been doing it were engaging in criminal conduct. And, and I think the other thing that DOGE is doing is we're going to see when, because every agency in town now has a DOGE team. That was part of the president's executive order.
Yeah.
And they're looking at this stuff, and we knew it was bad, but I don't think we had any idea how deep and broad and bad it really was. I mean, we're not just funding crazy stuff like queer story hours in Uganda and transgendered parades, in Bolivia or whatever it was, but we're actually using our taxpayer dollars to advance hardcore leftist agendas in this country, as well as around the world, that the American people not only never did vote for, but never would vote for. That's just an unbelievable abuse of power. And the people that have been engaged in it for a very long time need to be held accountable with orange suits and handcuffs.
Speaking of that, you were talking about the judge that made a ruling about Planned Parenthood, which is not right. And then everything DOGE is uncovering, the criminal conduct. In my lane with trying to help with the child trafficking situation in the United States, I call our judicial system the injustice system. That's what I call it, because I tell you, John, I rarely see justice for the children, for the perpetrators. It's like upside down land. And if people are brought to justice, like the DOGE, just one example, or even, Hillary or the intelligence agencies that were involved in this conspiracy, with our current judicial system, at least the judges in place, how can we see justice until we have good judges?
Well, unfortunately, elections have consequences, and the 8 years of Obama and then the 4 years of Biden really stacked the deck with judges. And we have to be very clear what we're talking about here. We're not talking about justices or judges that operate within a reasonable Overton window of just disagreements about the interpretation of the law.
Right.
We've always had that. What
Right.
we are talking about is a group of people that are activists, that were picked because they were activists, and that they use the law and they manipulate the law as an excuse to push their agenda rather than, having reasonable disagreements about what the law actually requires. And that's a new thing we've never seen before in this country at that level. And unfortunately, almost from the very beginning, we took one of the checks on that kind of abuse in the Constitution off the table. The founders envisioned two checks on an independent judiciary. And why do we talk about an independent judiciary? This is very important, and it goes to the heart of the false claims that, they're undermining our democracy. Well, anybody that actually knows anything about American history knows we're not a raw democracy.
That's right.
Pure democracy. Pure democracy means majority gets to rule no matter what.
Mob rule.
A constitutional republic says the majority rules, but only when it's rightful and not infringing on the rights of others. Our system of checks and balances, of separated powers, of federalism, all of that is designed to let majority rule flourish, but only when it's rightful and it's not infringing on the rights of others. All of those other constitutional checks are designed to protect minority, meaning anybody not in the majority, not just skin color or religion or anything else, but anybody not in the majority, to protect their individual rights, to secure their inalienable rights, to use the language of the Declaration. So we have all that there, but you needed an independent judiciary to help stand up and check a wayward majority, a majority that became majority tyranny.
Yeah.
It had to be independent. But anytime you give people power, if it's not checked, it could be abused as well. And the founders recognized that judicial power unchecked could be as abusive as majority power in the legislature or in the king, right?
Right.
And so they had checks on the judicial power as well. Front end checks, I like to call them. And they're not appointed, self-appointed. They're appointed by the president by and with the advice and consent of the Senate. That was considered a check to make sure we only had people of character and quality get into those lifetime appointments. But they also envisioned a much more vigorous back end check, an impeachment power. And we've developed a notion that you can't ever impeach a judge for decisions from the bench, no matter how bad and unconstitutional they are. You can only impeach them for private malfeasance. That's exactly the opposite of the way the founders would have looked at it. Much more dangerous that they engage in malfeasance in office than anything they can do in their private character. The
Right.
impeachment power was designed to check that abuse. Unfortunately, Jefferson, who's a great president and a big hero of mine, in response to the abuses by the federal judges against his supporters, they then tried to impeach one of those judges for pretty partisan grounds, and that got blocked. But the pendulum then swung all the way back the other direction, never to use impeachment at all against judges for any conduct they do on the bench. And that's just insane. That means you've now created a branch with unchecked power. And the only thing that keeps them from being abusive of that power is their own integrity. And when you appoint judges that by definition are furthering an agenda rather than sticking with any notion of integrity, you've now created a valuable solution for abuse. And that's exactly what we're witnessing here in recent years.
Do you have any idea what percentage of justices in our judicial system are activists?
I'd say after the 8 years of Obama and the 4 years of the Biden auto pen being run by Obama hacks, I'd say probably 40 to 50%.
Which explains the injustice.
Yeah, well, and it's also they kind of gravitate. They've got more overwhelming numbers in a couple of federal districts and courts
Right.
of appeals, which is why you see all these cases. California joins a suit in Boston.
Right.
Why? Because the District Court of Boston is almost entirely Obama and Biden appointed judges, and the First Circuit Court of Appeals that supervises it likewise, or the District of Maryland, or the district up in Seattle. You see all 80% or some number of the cases of the 100 or 200 cases brought against Trump already have been brought in those districts.
Right.
And because the odds of getting a very friendly activist judge is much higher in those districts. You don't see them bringing any in the Northern District of Texas, or the
I don't.
or the Southern District of Mississippi, or the Middle District of Florida. I wonder why that is.
Never heard of that, John. Who has the power to impeach? If that's our solution, who's got the
Well,
power?
unfortunately, it's a very high hurdle. You got to get a majority in the House of Representatives, but then you got to get a 2/3 vote at the Senate.
Oh,
And I'm gonna draw a Nixon analogy here. Nixon resigned only when it became clear that Republicans themselves were not going to continue to support him. And if he got impeached, there would be enough Republicans to join with Democrats to probably convict over in the Senate. We don't have anybody, not a single person on the Democrat side of the aisle, that would vote to impeach or vote to convict on impeachment, no matter how egregious the conduct was, because it's partisan, it's hyper partisan, and they're sticking with their team rather than the Constitution and what's good for the American Republic. I don't think we've seen that level of intense partisanship since the 1860s and the launch of the Civil War.
wow. So one last question before we go to our next topic. With what Tulsi Gabbard's doing, do you anticipate us seeing Hillary Clinton looked into, or these employees at these three-letter agencies that willingly participate in this conspiracy?
Well, they are looking into it.
Okay.
You've got Pam Bondi as Attorney General. You've got very significant people, both in criminal division and in civil rights division. My friend Harmeet Dillon, and
Yes.
one of my former students over the civil rights division.
Yeah.
I think most importantly, you had now have as head of the weaponization task force, Ed Martin. I think the Democrats are going to rue the day when they block his confirmation to be U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, because he got elevated to now have a nationwide portfolio of work looking at weaponization. And I know Ed pretty well. Ed's not a wallflower to kind of back down to this stuff. The only thing I would caution people who are rightly impatient, they want to see people perp walked, and these folks deserve it. They want to see some of the treatment like Steve Bannon and Peter Navarro got for claiming privileges and then getting cited with contempt of Congress. They want to see people treated like Roger Stone was, with CNN coverage at 6 a.m. breaking down his doors, or Jeff Clark, who was forced to stand out in his front yard in front of all his neighbors in his underwear for hours while they raided every electronic device, his daughter's diaries, and everything else. They want to see people subjected to the same kind of abuse. And it's not abuse for them, because these guys are actually criminals. They want to see that. But here's the thing. We've got a couple of people heading the Department of Justice out of thousands and thousands and thousands of line employees, who almost all line up with the left side of the political aisle. That's just the nature of government. Conservative Republicans tend to like being in business and independent. They don't gravitate toward government jobs as the capstones on their careers.
Right.
Whereas the left think this is the cat's meow. And so you've got half a dozen people at the top trying to redirect a ship of state where everybody's rowing the other direction. And it takes a while. And the other thing that's important for people to remember is putting together a rock solid case of conspiracy and crossing the T's, and then looking at where you can bring those things in jurisdictions. That's hard work. It's time consuming, and it needs to be done perfectly, because you're not going to get two cracks at it. If you do something wrong and it gets dismissed, then they're off the hook. So you've got to be very careful. But the team that's in there now supervising this, I think, is managing it. I'm not going to give them the whole first 2 years of the Trump administration to get these things brought, but I'm cutting them a little bit more slack. Let's wait to see what comes out in the next 4, 5, 6 months while they build those cases to be impeccable, so that they don't immediately get dismissed by some radical judge someplace.
So let's switch to these ICE. Let's talk about what's happening with ICE and the deportations, these sanctuary city mayors. Share your insight and your opinions on that topic.
Sure. Well, thank God for President Trump. And I loved the line when the first numbers came out, how the number of illegal border crossings had dropped to almost zero. And Trump said, or somebody said, turns out we didn't need a new law. We just needed somebody with the will to enforce the existing law.
Right.
That was wonderful. And look, I mean, this was not something that came out of left field by Trump after he was inaugurated. Every single one of his rallies, every one of his campaign messages and campaign ads, every one of his surrogates speaking on his behalf. This was the one or number one or top two issue in his campaign, both in 2016 and in 2020 and in 2024. And the American people overwhelmingly supported that agenda. And,
Yes.
and he moved quickly to implement it with very little resources. I mean, look, ICE had been deprived of its resources, and you know why they couldn't do it. And we now got a lot of new funding in the big, beautiful bill. The
Yes.
Democrats, there's something going on here. The kind of victimization mentality of the Democrats, and they just treat these illegal. They can't even call them illegal immigrants, illegal aliens, which is the term
Right.
in the statute.
That's
It's
right.
undocumented, like somebody forgot their driver's license at home and went down to the Dairy Queen. I mean, they're
Right.
not undocumented. They are here in violation of our laws. They are
That's
here undermining our sovereignty. They can't even bring themselves to do that. But there's something even more nefarious going on, and that is they are stacking millions and millions of people into jurisdictions that are heavily Democrat. And that gets them, I think I've seen it, I don't recall what the number was, 10 or 15 additional congressional seats to blue states, that many additional electoral votes to blue states as
Yes.
a result of this illegal immigration. And for a long time, and President Trump has been trying to do this as well by requiring on our census that we identify who citizens are and
Right.
only count citizens for purposes of reapportionment. I think the Supreme Court is going to finally recognize that that's what the Constitution not only allows but requires. It specifically excluded Indians not taxed. And what did that mean? Indians not taxed was the group of people in our borders in 1787 when the Constitution was drafted who were not part of our political community. Take that principle and modernize it. People who are here as temporary visitors or people who are here illegally are not part of our political community. And
Right.
if the political community, if the government is to be based on the consent of the governed, of those who form the political community, to count among the representation those who are not part of the political community, gives an unfair advantage to the jurisdictions where those people are temporarily residing, even illegally residing. Now, it didn't matter much for most of our history because people temporarily visiting were kind of evenly spread across the country, and there was no kind of disparate impact on counting them. But now there's a massive disparate impact. The example I like to give is suppose the 1984 Olympics, Summer Olympics that were held in Los Angeles, 10 million people visiting from around the world,
Right.
Massive influx of people into Los
Yeah.
Angeles. Let's suppose that Olympics was 1980 instead of 1984. And August, when the Summer Olympics are going on, is right when they're doing the census. Now, are you going to give California 10 million extra people on their census? That at the time would have been 20 extra congressional districts, 20 extra electoral votes. Are you going to give California that much because they happen to have the Olympics going on with all those people from around the world? I mean, that's just utter nonsense.
It is.
And yet that's what's going on now. And the reason the Democrats are fighting so hard against President Trump's deportation orders is that illegal population giving them extra power than what they deserved among our citizenry is the last hold they have on any power whatsoever. So it's really an abusive power game, an illegitimate power game that's being played here. And President Trump is right, in my view, to enforce it and say, look, I said we're going to deport the criminals, but if you came here illegally with violation of our law, you're one of the criminals. And if you also committed other crimes like murder or rape or child trafficking, we're going to prioritize you because you're the really bad guys, and we're going to get you out first. And if necessary, because I got some judge saying I can't deport you, I'll put you in Alcatraz, Alligator Alcatraz down in Florida. or something. But he's serious about it. And then just was it yesterday, 2 days ago, a new mob raid on the ICE headquarters in Portland.
Yes.
And the immediate response from federal law enforcement to arrest those folks,
Yes.
instead of letting this utter nonsense and chaos and lawlessness go on for 170 days, like happened back in 2020.
Yes.
And when you don't enforce the law, people get away with it. If you do enforce the law, they tend to pay attention and cease the illegal conduct. We've known that for a very long time. It's part of human nature.
You know what I've been personally shocked at, John, is in social media seeing in California cities that are empty, just empty, streets that are empty because illegals are hiding. And it looks like entire populations of towns aren't even U.S. citizens. It's kind of shocking to see. I mean, I see you smiling. You're not surprised.
I'm not surprised, but my friends up in the San Fernando Valley tell me it's how easy it is to get downtown now because the traffic's a lot less. My wife and daughter and family were out at dinner recently at a restaurant, and we got accosted. Somebody recognized me and said, "Who would you deport?" And my answer, I wasn't quick enough on my feet to tell him, but my answer is simply anybody who's here illegally. No one's above the law. Isn't that what you all have been telling us for a long time?
I think we've heard that 1,000,001 times if we've heard it once. I love that clip where they had how many people for how many minutes on the DEM side. No one's above the law. No one's above the law. And then all of a sudden we have millions of people who they believe is above the law.
Yeah. Well, and I've been looking ever since Tulsi Gabbard released this explosive set of documents, declassified documents, about what really went on in 2016.
Yeah.
And I keep waiting for it to show up in the New York Times or the Washington Post. They seem more concerned that President Trump, that Jeffrey Epstein was an attendee at his wedding in 1993. So was Howard Stern, by the way. I wonder if Trump's going to now be tagged with every vile thing Howard Stern ever said. Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton were there as well. I've seen pictures. So maybe he should be part of the Clinton conspiracy family. I don't know because they showed up at his wedding. But they're using that story as propaganda to hide the explosive, biggest political scandal in our nation's history. I've been talking about it in those terms for quite a while, just from what I knew, and I didn't have access to any of the classified materials that Tulsi Gabbard has now declassified and released, and it's confirming everything I've been saying since 2016. They launched a coup against the sitting president of the United States back in 2016. They spied on him when he was a candidate. This is beyond Nixon, private burglars trying to spy on the Democrat Party. This was the use of government itself to spy on the opposing political party. They continued to spy on him after he was elected. They continued to spy on him and Mike Flynn and set up after he was inaugurated and was their boss. And they were doing setups. They were leaking. This is the biggest, and they doctored evidence to do it. We now know for a fact. This is the biggest political scandal in American history, and it's just been shuffled under the rug like it was, yesterday's old news. I hope that Pam Bondi understands how vitally important it is that these people be prosecuted, because if they're not, what good is the rule of law?
Amen. And that was the third topic I wanted you to cover today that you moved into nicely. People are getting very confused and upset about the Epstein files and Trump's response. And I just want to read his post on Truth Social, July 24. And he says that the Dems are deflecting from his successes the first 6 months by playing another Russia hoax, but this time under the guise of what will we call the Jeffrey Epstein scam, with things to be revealed. So President Trump has a different narrative about the Epstein files than what everyone on social media has been saying.
Right. So I think there are a couple things going on here, and I've not seen any of the files or taken the time to read what's even publicly available. But here's my sense of what's going on.
Okay.
One, there were a lot of people that were in Epstein's Rolodex, to use an old word that the
Yeah.
Gen Zers probably don't. I was on a X. Crazy, put out words that they have no idea what you're talking about. Sears, S&H green stamps. And I put in turn the screw clockwise because none of them know what a clock face is. So I got that. So you know, so for those, you know, everybody in Rolodex was Epstein. Anybody that had ever had any dealings with Epstein or that he ever called or worked or partnered with or anything else, that's the big Epstein list, right? Of contacts. Not all of those contacts had any knowledge of or anything to do with the underage girl or boys trafficking and the sexcapades on the Epstein Island or at the ranch or anywhere else. And so they're trying to confuse. Trump is obviously connected with Epstein in the former category, and they're trying to then gloss over that by being associated with him 20, 30 years ago, he must be on the pedophile list as well, right? So that's scam number one. Scam number two is that they're using this non-story. We've known that Epstein had been doing this, and lots of people, I mean, he made his business because of his contacts and his access and his influence. So it's a non-story, and they're resurrecting it now in large part to, I think, keep the Tulsi Gabbard stuff off the front page news. It's not just trying to avoid talking about Trump's successes on tariffs and the economy and everything else, but it's to keep this explosive information off the front page of the news as well. So that's scam number two. And then scam number three, again, Trump hinted at it recently. I have no idea whether it's accurate or not, but you know, he tends not to hint at things if he doesn't have the receipts that he can back them up with. All of his, you know, oh, Trump's engaged in another conspiracy theory. Well, we're running out of conspiracy theories because they're all turning out to be true. And his latest one, and it wouldn't surprise me at all, given the doctoring of the Russia hoax information, is that somebody planted his name in some of the bad guy parts of the Epstein files in order to create that scandal. And when he talks about scam, I think that may well be what's going on as well. And you know, and getting to the bottom of that and disproving it is a difficult thing. And no matter how clear cut it was a hoax or a fraud, you're going to have half of the country still believing. I mean, half of the country still believes Hillary Clinton won the 2016 election because Russia manipulated our votes. I mean, it's insane. And so that's the third part of the scam that he hinted at. I don't know whether that's there or not, but it wouldn't surprise me given what Tulsi Gabbard's releasing on the other stuff.
Well, and I'm so glad you brought that up because this has been actually on my mind. I'm watching Tulsi and I'm watching her and others associated with her do an excellent job bringing the evidence forward, bringing the facts forward. Our side has always been very factually based, well documented, factually based. When I see half the country still thinking Hillary won the election, and I see Tulsi bring the receipts, in my mind I think, will half the country think this is just all made up and meaningless, or do you think they'll actually, because I know our side is hoping that they'll finally see the truth, but they haven't seemed to have seen the truth before.
It's you know, you can see it with video and they still don't believe it. One of the charges against me in the California bar proceeding is that in one of the cases I filed down in Georgia, I said that the observers in State Farm Arena were sent home because counting had been stopped for the night. And then after they departed, suitcases of ballots were pulled out from under a table, and then they were illegally processed.
Yes.
Now I was found in both the trial court and the appellate panel with their recommendations for disbarment. I was found to have lied about that because they weren't suitcases. But for God's sakes, they were ballot bins on wheels, like a rollerboard suitcase, and the employees themselves call them suitcases. The point of it was that the Georgia law requires that you give the political parties and the candidates an opportunity to observe. And when they were told that we're shutting down counting for the night and they left home, and then they weren't provided notice that they were restarting the counting, that violated the law. It didn't matter whether they were suitcases or ballot bins. It didn't matter whether they were fraudulent votes or perfectly fine votes. The issue was they were counting them outside of the legally required observation. And I'm that's one of the counts that they want to disbar me for. And it's just, we saw it on the video. We saw it happen. We got sworn affidavits of people that saying that they were told that they were shutting down for the night and to come back at 8:30 the next morning. And I'm the one lying because I called them on that and said, what you did was illegal. And so, there's this notion that truth is elastic, and that no matter how clear cut something is, if it's counter to an agenda that the left wants to run, you're the ones lying because you don't bend the knee to the demonstrably false thing that the government is telling you. This is George Orwell, the man from the Ministry of Truth, showing up to demand that you say 2 + 2 is 5, and not only repeat the lie but actually come to believe it. This is Orwellian, and it seemed to me extremely important to go back to the question you asked me at the very beginning, that we push back against that nonsense with all we've got.
Yes.
Because if we don't, we'll become sheep in an increasingly tyrannical government. And what we'll be teaching our kids is not the greatness of America, but the greatness of America that once was. And that's not something I'm willing to do.
God bless you for your efforts, John. I know that they are really putting you through the ringer, and you are a patriot and a fighter. And I know President Trump says that he's in front of us, protecting us from the bad guys getting to us. But I see you shoulder to shoulder with President Trump, also defending we the people as a shield. And I know that you've paid a lot for it. It's like the founding fathers. What were the 3 things they pledged? That their lives,
their fortunes, their lives, and they meant it. They knew signing that document was committing treason against the king, and if they lost, they'd lose their heads. They pledged their fortunes. Ask Robert Morris, who basically was the Elon Musk of his day that funded the revolution. And most important for them, they pledged their sacred honor.
Yes.
That was an age when honor still mattered, and today it doesn't seem to matter much for most people. But there are still some where honor is the important thing.
Well, it matters to me, and it matters to you, and it matters to President Trump. I believe it mattered to our founding fathers, and I believe for those that we the people, the righteousness in the fight. All 3 of those matter, but honor, nothing is more important than our word and honor and doing the right thing. So God bless you so much for your time today. I know what a busy man you are. It's been
Lynn, let me make an offer to your audience. There was a documentary made about what I've been dealing with. It's called The Eastman Dilemma: Lawfare or Justice.
Yes.
It's still available online for free streaming at eastmandilemma.com. And let me make this offer to your audience. If they have a group of patriots that they want to get together and have a movie night and watch the movie, contact you. You can contact me. They can contact me through you, and I will Zoom call in after the movie to do a 15 or 20 minute Q&A if they want. eastmandilemma.com.
Awesome, John.
Yeah, and then I would encourage people, if they're inclined to help with our legal battles, to visit givesendgo.com/Eastman, our legal defense fund site. People can send donations to help. They can also send prayers. My wife and I read them. They're heartwarming. And we also use it as a bit of a blog to keep people updated on what the latest is.
That is wonderful. I'll be sure to put that in the show notes too. And God bless you for that, John. That gets me super excited. Like, I'm already like, okay, where can I find a group of people to do this? I think I can
Yeah.
do this.
Well, and if it's a really big group and it happens to fit with my travel schedule, I'll even come in. But I found the Zoom thing is a little bit easier on my wear and tear, and I can get to more places that way.
Well, and you're very, very busy. I know before I hit record, you were so gracious to give me a full hour because of how busy you are. So God bless you and Godspeed. And to my audience, until next time, this is the Lynne Scott Haggerman Podcast, where truth is rising, and so are we.
Light breaks the shadow of the weary heart. Truth cuts the dark like a flaming dart. Voices rising strong.